was really famous before he was pretty well known, before he was rather obscure. Antheil was born in Trenton, New Jersey in 1900, and when people met him in his youth, they tended to come away with the impression that he was a genius. He was a terrific concert pianist. He had what he called a photographic ear, so that he could hear something once and play it back perfectly. His teenaged composition, which included a symphony, several sonatas, a song cycle, and some chamber music, impressed both Ernest Bloch and Igor Stravinsky. Also, the guy was really handsome. He was a lot of fun at parties. He could talk your ear off on any subject. And he was confident to the point of being brazen. So some combination of these attributes landed Antheil in Paris in 1922, right in the center of a really remarkable group of intellectuals and artists and writers and musicians who were at the avant-garde of the modernist movement. So not only was he rubbing shoulders with Stravinsky and Erik Satie, Antheil was partying with James Joyce and Ezra Pound and Ernest Hemingway. This group thought and talked and wrote about modernism incessantly. They were really eager to cast off the last vestiges of the old culture which had led disastrously to the Great War, and they wanted to create something new and fine and pure and modern to put in its place. Antheil was no exception. He wrote a lot at this point, and he made statements such as, melody no longer exists. The only aspect, I'm not quite quoting, but almost, the only aspect of music that remains to be explored is time, to be measured more and more precisely. And the music of the future is music that will be made by machines. Hey, come on, we have to make a living. From the perspective of 1945, when he was writing his autobiography, Antheil chuckled at these youthful pronunciamentos, as he called them, but at the time, people took them very seriously. And they took him and his music seriously, too. His early music was full of all kinds of pounding ostinato rhythms. And he tended to take blocks of musical material and slap them down next to each other in ways that were surprising or jarring. He also liked to be, he had a real rhythmic vitality. He would take jazzy syncopations and put them throughout his music. He liked to be satirical. So he would take a musical idea and make it sound sentimental and then stomp all over it with horrible discords. His concerts in Paris caused riots. But that's not really such a big deal because you weren't much of a modernist unless you could have a couple of riots. What Antheil really wanted was to have a success in the United States so that he could make a living. So in 1927, a much anticipated concert in Carnegie Hall of Antheil's music was arranged. And the concert had a jazz sonata and a jazz symphony and the culmination of his machine music phase, which was a piece called the Ballet Mécanique. This piece was supposed to be for 16 player pianos, all of them playing off the same piano roll. They couldn't quite get that to work, so they had 10 real pianos with pianists. They had an array of all kinds of percussion instruments, and then they had all kinds of machines that made sounds, including several propellers of different sizes and a wind-up fire siren. The concert did not go as planned. Somebody made a mistake with the largest airplane propeller. And instead of aiming it up and out, they aimed it at the 12th row of the audience, so that when they turned it on, people's hats and programs were flying all over the place. And one gentleman tied a white handkerchief to his cane and waved it back and forth as a sign of surrender. Then at the key moment in the piece, when all of the intricate rhythms were going simultaneously and all the instruments were playing, it came time to cue the fire siren. So the conductor pointed, and the musician turned the crank, nothing happened. Pointed again, turned the crank more emphatically, nothing happened. So the piece continued, and as the closing chords took place, the siren went off, and it got louder and louder, and they couldn't stop it. So the applause and the laughter were drowned out by this fire siren. As you can imagine, the critics had a field day. And although he wrote a great deal of music after this that was very well received, Antheil never really recovered his prominence after this Carnegie Hall fiasco. And the ironic thing is that by 1927, he no longer considered himself a modernist. He had decided that he was a neoclassicist. And shortly thereafter, his hero Stravinsky would be replaced by a new hero, Beethoven. Antheil wanted to write symphonies and concertos and sonatas. So of course, when they heard his neoclassical music, the moderns cut him dead because he had abandoned them. And everybody else still thought that he was a failed avant-garde composer because of the Carnegie Hall thing. So Antheil had to find another way to make a living. Fortunately, he was a terrific writer. And he wrote a series of advice columns that were syndicated in newspapers and magazines, including one for lovelorn hearts. Antheil claimed that he had the ability, just at a glance, to tell if a girl would sleep with you or not. So he made a living doing giving that kind of advice. More substantial. By the way, his biography, his autobiography, "The Bad Boy of Music," it is a hoot. It's a great beach book. And I would guess it's nearly half true. So I recommend it very strongly. More substantially, he moved to Hollywood and became a very successful film composer. He wrote lots of film scores, and with tremendous discipline, he also continued to study the scores of Mahler and Bruckner and Beethoven, and to write classically inspired music, and to work on the project of integrating those old classical forms with 20th century musical language. So the Trumpet Sonata was written in California in 1951, at a time when he was studying the sonata to try to make his form ever more concise. He was no longer an iconoclast, but he hasn't lost his sense of humor. And we can still hear some of the young Antheil at work. He still enjoys a really catchy rhythm. He still enjoys taking musical ideas and slapping them down next to each other in a way that's surprising. He still enjoys being satirical, so he'll take a musical idea and not really develop it, but he'll repeat it and transform it. You'll hear in the first movement that he states the theme in an elegant lyrical way. Then he states it again as a series of fragments, and then again as a boisterous 6/8 march, and then as a wild crazy ride, and then it comes back and is stated again at the end. In fact, very often he would state something at the beginning and then restate it at the end. So here is the lyrical, satirical, schizophrenic, never boring Sonata for Trumpet by George Antheil. this recital. First and foremost, my teacher Dave Krause, who was just an awesome musician, and he's just helped me to a remarkable degree. Thank you, Dave. Thank you to Professor Doug Lundeen and to Professor Corinna Brook for being here. And I am extraordinarily grateful to Allison Brewster Franzetti. We've done a little exploration of Antheil that goes way beyond what an accompanist would normally do. So she's a collaborator and a friend, as well as a musical colleague. So speaking of things to be grateful for, how's that for a segue? Aren't we glad that we don't live in a time when people look down on music because it's expressive? Those moderns were a tough crowd. Stravinsky said, and I'm not quoting exactly, but it's almost, he said that music by its very nature is incapable of expressing anything. And I could name a dozen Stravinsky pieces that prove him wrong, because I think Stravinsky is tremendously expressive. But boy, a lot of 20th century composer had trouble with the moderns living up to that standard of purity. Leonard Bernstein had an awful time being taken seriously because they heard his music as being tainted by Broadway and also containing influences from other composers. Prokofiev was thought of as being too sentimental. I didn't like that. One of Antheil's symphonies was criticized for sounding too much like Prokofiev, and that's wrong because why? And boy, God forbid, a generation or so ago, if you admitted within academia that you liked Rachmaninoff or Tchaikovsky, right? These were thought to be just second-rate composers. So, do you know why we are no longer afraid to have expressivity in our music? It's because we're no longer modern. We're postmodern. And as good postmoderns, we have a great distrust of any hierarchies between high art and other kinds of art. We think that, in fact, there's no such thing as objective standards for art. Everybody hears or perceives art a little differently. As a matter of fact, we tend to distrust any kind of aesthetic judgments about art at all. I'm leaving aside the question of when this gets silly. For example, why should I listen to the music of Mozart when I can listen to music that I wrote? Right? That question doesn't need answering. But it is really worth celebrating that a composer now can write music that you might want to sing or you might want to dance to, and that we can take it seriously at the same time. It is an interesting question, I find, the question of an artist who starts in one style and then changes styles. Antheil did this and got in trouble with the moderns. Stravinsky did it a lot, right? He started out as a Russian nationalist, and then he was this modernist using primitivism, and then he was a neoclassicist, and then he experimented with 12-tone. And the analogy in the art world, of course, is Picasso, who changed styles all the time. He wasn't a cubist forever. Miles Davis did it. Miles Davis did something really great for a while and then moved on to something really different. But the story that we're more familiar with, I think, is the story of an artist who has a youthful style and then finds their real voice. And they find themselves at home in the style, and then they can grow the style and grow within the style. And that's a pretty good description of Eric Ewazen. I happen to know that Eric Ewazen wrote spiky atonal music when he was at Juilliard, because way back in the 20th century, I played some of his pieces there. There was a piece for trumpet and marimba, and the marimba part was so hard that the marimba player kept saying, "Eric, you can't do that." There was a piece for trumpet and timpani that was really fun. I liked playing that one. It was called Kronos. It was about a god who bit people's heads off. And I'll just say that the subject matter and the music went together really well. But as Eric matured, he found his voice. voice is a tonal voice. It's an expressive voice. And it does a lot of things really well. Eric does lyrical really well, and I am grateful to Eric for his lyrical writing for brass. He's found the affinity between brass instruments and singers. We love being treated like singers. Eric does exciting really well. He does dance-like really well. He does lilting lullabies really well. He does what I think of as the Captain Jack Sparrow motif. He does rollicking really well, as though we're all on a pirate ship. So the question that as postmoderns we tend to ask now about a piece is not, is this piece going to represent something pure and new that will take modern music to the next place? We don't ask that question so much. We ask, does this music speak to me where I am now on first hearing? And does it reward further study? In other words, the more I play it and the more I study it, does it continually have more to offer? If so, it's a deep piece. So here is a lyrical, exciting, dance-like, gentle, rollicking, deep trumpet sonata.
you.